Fantastic. Now let's also talk about the book. Aside from being, it's not just a combat novel, this book describes the conditions in the South at that time fully. Tell us about that, because that is also very, very important.
Well, I also wanted to talk about the valor and sacrifice of the civilians, especially the women. And for that reason, I centered the story around the young lady so I could tell both sides of the war. And the struggle in Culpeper went on for almost 4 years, and the civilian population basically lost their entire food supply. Their fences were gone. The county was ravaged, completely ravaged, and I think the way these people survived is an inspiring story of the human spirit, really.
And I don't think people really understand how much the South went through as far as the deprivation and the damage to their towns and their area, and you really bring that out in this book. Was there a sense that you wanted to perhaps de-vilify in some ways the South as far as being, you know, the aggressors, or at least looked at in many historical accounts as the aggressors?
Well, I think that's true. I think they are looked on as the villains, and I wanted to tell the story through the eyes of the people who lived through it in Culpeper, and of course they were attacked. You know, they felt they had been invaded. They had been invaded.
It was the war of northern aggression.
Absolutely,
yes.
And so many people who've read Marching Through Culpeper have said, you really gave me a different perspective. You opened my eyes, particularly people from the North who've said, I never knew any of this. And you made me reread the Constitution. So it makes people realize, you know, what really happened to the civilian population.
Absolutely.
Everybody loses in a war. You know?
In this one, in your book, there really are no winners.
There are no winners.
Absolutely not, and you make that quite apparent.
Right.
Many of the characters in the book, except for, I think, 2, are actually real.
Yes.
Depictions of real people.
Yes.
And we want to talk about quite a few of them. Did you have any, weaving the fictitious in with the real characters, did you ever feel that there were some issues with historical inaccuracies, or think that there could be some issues with historical inaccuracy?
That's always a question that you get in historical fiction. I tried to be as true to the characters as possible. Everything that I knew, I incorporated. It's when there are gaps when you don't know anything that you have to make the story flow, and you use your imagination. But with the real characters, I think I truly did show them as human beings the way they really were. And most of my readers have said, you know, I knew them. They were my friends.
Yes.
When they died, I was devastated, you know, the ones who died. So it really makes you become emotionally attached to these people.
Was there information that you'd actually use when you were having them converse that added some validity to the
Many times I either used direct quotes of things they said or letters that they had written to give the authenticity to the scenes. And I certainly placed them where they were. It's chronological, as you know. I wrote it by the day, you know.
Yes.
I tried to, here's where they were on this particular day, you know, and what they may have seen.
And the reader follows along quite well. It's great. We're going to take a break right there. We'll be right back with more Books and Authors. Welcome back to Books and Authors. My guest is Virginia B. Morton. The book is Marching Through Culpeper. Virginia, let's talk about some of the characters, especially Constance Armstrong, who is really the pivotal character, and this is one strong woman.
She is a strong woman.
Let's take from there and let's talk about Constance.
Well, I wanted to center the story around a real person, and when I was researching Major John Pelham, and I'll put up a photograph here of him.
Absolutely.
Pelham was the commander of the Stuart Horse Artillery, a young, handsome, blue-eyed blonde, certainly one of the most famous young men in the Confederacy. And I discovered he was romantically involved with a young lady named Bessie Shackelford, who lived in this house. And Bessie and her daughters, her sisters, were described as being extraordinary for their time because they were so well educated, and they were free thinkers, and they spoke their mind on public issues, which of course was very unusual. And I thought, these are my kind of women. And I decided to base the heroine Constance Armstrong on Bessie Shackelford, and I incorporated everything I knew about Bessie into her character, but I gave her a fictional name because I had to fill in a lot of gaps with my imagination. But she is a strong woman, and she's a very intelligent young lady, someone that modern readers can identify with.
And she had 3 suitors,
Yes, she
in
did.
the novel of different sides. She was involved in the war in many different ways.
Yes.
Unusual woman. Tell us a little bit about the fact that she actually had these suitors from the different sides of the war.
Well, initially, her first suitor is Major Robert Beckham, who was a Culpeper native. And he had graduated from West Point in 1859, so he began courting Constance before the war broke out. And then along came the dashing John Pelham that we talked about a minute ago, and he gave him stiff competition. And then in addition to that, there was a Union soldier, Aaron Ames, who was wounded at the Battle of Cedar Mountain. And he was taken into the Armstrong home by Constance, and he recovered there, and he also becomes infatuated with her. So you see both sides of the war through these soldiers.
And we also see examples of the occupation, because she is strong-armed by a lot of the Union officer corps.
Exactly.
And she doesn't give, but you really get an idea of the deprivation, the conditions that these people were living under, and I'm sure that was something you really wanted to put forth in the book.
I did. You know, the women, when the town was occupied by the Union Army, you know, they had them living in their homes whether they wanted it or not. One of the best descriptions of the women during that time was written by Walt Whitman, who was there. And he described one lady as being very well educated, high-spirited, but her clothes were faded. He felt sorry for her, but he kept emphasizing, but she maintained her high spirit, and they did.
Now let me ask you, what makes your novel, in your opinion, different from many of the Civil War novels we've seen come out of late, and those from John Jakes, I think it's Michael Shara's Killer Angels. How does your novel different?
It's probably more factual than most historical novels. Now, certainly Michael Shara and Killer Angels is one of the top factual ones. And the men who've read my book have compared the battle scenes to that, which is great flattery for me. Women, on the other hand, like the love story and the romance, and they say, well, that's as good as Gone with the Wind. So I was hoping to combine the best elements of those two wonderful classics. You know, and I think it is a very factual novel. You learn more probably than you do from most novels.